Well, I've got a comfy chair and I've got a book, so I feel like I should be starting this video with Once Upon a Time. So let's do that. Once upon a time, there was a young lad in America who got interested in carving, and he joined a local club and he learned how to carve, and he practiced and he practiced, and he must have started about the same age as me, but unlike me, he didn't get distracted by fishing and shooting and archery and all sorts of other things, and he practiced consistently and he became really quite good. And that guy's name was James Miller, and I've got his book here, Whittling Flat Plane Animals. Now, I must admit I haven't seen much flat plane carving before buying this book, and I haven't really ever attempted any before. A few relatively poor quality black and white photos in older books of flat plane carvings. Didn't really understand what it was all about, but I liked the look of some of these patterns and some of these projects, and I thought I'd like to give that a go. So I thought I'd offer a review of this book in case anyone else is interested in getting it. And I have to say, you know, having said that James Miller is quite a young guy, he says in here he started at the age of 11, so it is about the same as me, but as I say, he obviously has put in a lot more time and practice than I did, and he's actually won a medal from the Vesterheim Museum in America. He's had work published in magazines, and he's now written a book, so fair play to him. He's gone a lot further in the craft than I have as yet. And this is a really nicely produced book. We've got 15 different projects in here. It's really well illustrated. The photography is very good. Basically, each project starts out with a block of wood, and he bandsaws them to shape and then carves from there. There's a little introduction about the tools that he uses. There's a little information about how he paints and the carving technique that he uses, etc. And then you've got an intro about each animal and what its relevance is to Scandinavian culture, and then a breakdown of how to carve it with around 12 to 14 steps, all really clearly photographed. That's really nicely done. And I mean, the blurb here says this is perfect for beginners interested in wood carving or for experienced carvers looking to try something new. Now, I'm somewhere between the two. I wouldn't consider myself to be really an experienced carver, but I'm not a beginner either, and for me this was trying something new. So to an extent, I haven't followed the step-by-step process 100% in the projects I've tried so far. I've tried to stay with it as much as possible because A, it seems like the author is a good carver, and if I can learn from him then I will. And also B, if I'm going to review this, then I ought to try and look at it from a beginner's perspective and follow it to see how well it flows. I have to say it is quite clearly laid out, and the directions for each project are quite good. We'll have a look at the seal here. So there's one of the projects is a harbour seal, and there are step-by-step instructions on how to carve it. As I say, really well illustrated, kind of 13, 14 steps including the painting of it. And that's one that I've done. So there's my completed harbour seal. I'm quite pleased with it. It's not quite right. I haven't been bold enough on these front flippers. I haven't got them positioned 100% right, and I haven't got the feet really quite thin enough. But this is a first attempt at dry brushing. I'm relatively new to painting carvings. I haven't tended to do that before. And funnily enough, I've never carved a seal before either. And as I say, a first attempt at a Scandinavian flat plane style of carving. So I did find myself referring to the photographs of the finished project at all stages as I went through, and as I say, I tried to follow the step by step, but I did kind of end up doing things a little bit my own way and looking at the end product. There are no rules in carving as long as you're doing it safely, you know, beyond what's dictated by the grain of the wood. You can do things as you want. That's one of the beauties of it. But I think for a beginner, this would be a really good introduction to this carving style, and it would be a good introduction to carving generally. if I had one criticism of it, it's a relatively minor one, but there is a section in here on preparing wood and using a bandsaw or indeed a coping saw or similar to cut out the pattern, and I think that could be expanded on, you know, especially if this is at least partially aimed at beginners. Okay, you might argue that a beginner's less likely to have a bandsaw, but using that to cut out the pattern is arguably the most dangerous part of the whole process of doing the carving. You've only got kind of 3 photos on that, one of the tracing of the pattern being laid on the wood, one shot of it being cut out, and then the finished end result. So a little more information about the sequence of making those cuts would be useful. Here's my work in progress squirrel. If I get this finished shortly, then I will I'll put in some footage of the end result. I already know I've got the proportions slightly wrong. I haven't got the haunches wide enough. But anyway, cutting something like this out on the bandsaw, depending on the saw and the blade and everything, you may find some of the curves are too steep to do in one pass, so you may have to make some stop cuts in and then break that curve up into a series of shorter cuts. You know, there are practicalities about the order in which you cut something like that out in silhouette, which I know because I've done it before, but for a beginner would be useful to have detailed in the book. So that's one small reservation, but other than that, nicely written, really well illustrated, some really nice projects in here. And the other really good thing about it is you've got the patterns in the back here and they're all at 100%. So I don't know if the author has sized these projects to fit the book or sized the book to fit the projects, but that's really, really useful. If you haven't got to scale these up or down, you can just trace them onto a bit of wood and get carving. That's a real bonus, and they're really nice, clear patterns at full size. So yeah, in conclusion, a good book for beginners and probably a good book for any carver who's interested in flat plane carving, Scandinavian carving, and I would recommend it.